Hello, welcome back to the channel, and behind me we have my Navara Blue 2017 Audi S4 Avant, and I'm going to do a video of my thoughts after sort of 2,000 miles, 3 months of driving this car pretty much every day. As you can see, it is pretty dirty because I've done a ton of miles in it this week and it's rained and all sorts of rubbish, so unfortunately I haven't had time to clean it. But let's have a little look around the car and then I'm going to go for a drive and give you my thoughts. So having a bit of a walk around, you can see this is the S4. That means it is a 3-litre V6 turbocharged engine, 350 horsepower, a bit more torque. The S doesn't have a particularly wide body, but I'm all good with that as it's pretty dirty. Let's have a little, one of my favourite features of having used this car is just press a button, open the boot, and as you can see, it is full of stuff. Acer sent me a laptop to have a try out. I've got a light that I'm going to put in my new office, the site that I'm sorting out at the moment, and press a button, shut the boot. Obviously we've got the solid Audi thunk when you shut the doors, and inside the interior we've got this lovely interior with these stitched leather seats and the central display up there, and then that one over there. But it's a really nice place to be, to spend time, so I'm going to get in and go for a drive and give you my thoughts. Hello, welcome to the inside of my Audi S4 Avant. Now, I've had the car for 4 months or something like that, 3-4 months now, and I've just clocked over about 2,000 miles. I've taken it all over the place. It's just been my daily driver, and what does that involve? There's a lot of mooching around town, and then I live in London, and then a lot of driving around the country to do, for me at the moment, is do my podcasts, and I've been to Spa for a bit of racing and stuff like that, and it's just generally been my everyday car usage. And I wanted to give you a bit of a sort of, let's say, a 2,000 mile review of my 2017, so the petrol Audi S4 Avant. Now, number one for me, I guess the first thing is just the usability of this versus the car I came out of, which was my M2, and having it's the really simple stuff that on a day-to-day makes this so much of a nicer car for what I use it for. The Avant, so it's got the big boot, you press the button on the key and the boot opens, so when I'm lugging stuff I don't have to open it. Not that pressing the button is hard to open the boot, but on the M2 you have to actually lift the boot up. Then that big flat loading space with not really much of a lip, I just bung all my stuff in the back, shut it, and then off I go. And I just don't know why I didn't do it sooner. I just got a slightly more practical car. Loads of people in the comments when I said I was getting rid of my M2 for an S4 Avant was like, oh, it's a downgrade. What are you doing? Why didn't you get an M3? All of this sort of stuff. And an M3 just wasn't really what I wanted, to be honest. I don't particularly like the engine. I like the look of the car, but I wanted an Avant. I wanted that big boot. I didn't want a saloon for when you're putting in bigger objects. Anyway, let's get to how the car drives. And conveniently, I've just got onto quite a good little road, and it has a few different modes. So it's like comfort, there's an efficiency one, which I actually use quite a lot just for cruising around. So it just gets the car's a little bit more efficient. And then you can put it in dynamic mode and it sounds a bit louder. I think with an exhaust this would sound quite good actually. The petrol has got to sound tons better than the diesel. And I haven't really had a lot of driving on open, fast flowing roads. And it just actually today is it's a little bit cold, it's a little bit wet, it's a little bit slippy, sort of drying, and four-wheel drive, all of these things, you can cover ground so fast. And let's say the steering's very sort of Audi. It's not, you don't feel tons, but that's kind of like most cars nowadays. The engine is 350 horsepower. I ended up going for the S4 rather than the RS4 because I sort of felt they were so similar. The extra cost of the RS for anything other than the looks, which I do love, just didn't make much sense. And now I'm quite enjoying having a bit of a more understated car, a little bit narrower, but still 0 to 60 sub 5 seconds, which is, it's fast. It's surprisingly fast. I think I've had a few passengers that are like, oh, this is a bit of an estate car, a slow estate car, and then you put your foot down. Normally I have tons of luggage in the car when I'm pushing on, and it sort of ends up flying around a little bit. Probably need to tie it down. But now on this road today, I'm having, let's get on the brakes, yeah, turn in, and you can just, I forget how fast you can drive in a four-wheel drive car, because you just keep going. Obviously I'm only going up to 60 miles an hour, but yeah, it's a fun car to drive. It's not as fun as, let's say, something like the M2, but then you get the breadth of all the abilities. The majority of time in this car I spend just cruising around town and stuff like that. And the interior, I love the interior of this car. I love the diamond stitching on these seats with the, you know, this white sort of silver grey stitching everywhere. I'm not sure about the big stuck-on screen, but it sort of is what it is in these cars, I think. I've got the digital dash, which you can pop around and all that sort of stuff. I think it's quite cool. You can have the nav up there. The number one change over previous cars in terms of nav and things is this car has Apple Carplay, and I have not had a car that has Apple Carplay. And now I know there are plenty of cars cheaper than this that have Apple Carplay, and there are obviously some that are more expensive that have Apple Carplay. But for me as an iPhone user, it is brilliant. I love it. Now, a lot of people with this car, or the replacement, the diesel version, has the touchscreen, and I know Joe and people were saying they didn't like the touchscreen. Well, having now used this car a lot with the Apple CarPlay and all that sort of stuff, Apple CarPlay is really designed for a touch interface, so it's a little bit clunky using the twizzle dials and stuff like that. So if you're using just the Audi interface and the Audi radio and whatever, all of the touch buttons and the twizzles and whatever work really well. But when you're using CarPlay, it's a little bit clunky because you sort of have to just rotate this dial over and over and over to try and get your mouse point in the right place. So I would actually totally have the touch screen update on this, even though fingerprints on this sort of thing do my head in. But if it's a touch screen, it's a touch screen. Efficiency, it's not bad. In town, I think I probably get, just sort of driving around pretty sedately, I probably get 18, 20, just because that's a lot of start-stop. If you drove fast, you could definitely just like 10. If you accelerated away from every lights and all that stuff, you'd be down there. But on a motorway, it's pretty good, actually. I was surprised. Or if you drive at 70-ish, 70, 71, and you go for like a bit of an eco run, you see, I think you could get 40. I really do think you could get 40 on a motorway. If there's loads of traffic and whatever, you might get less, but you're definitely up in the high 30s on motorway runs, which is quite nice for someone that's used to not getting very much. I know if you've got a diesel car, that's pretty awful, but you get over 400 miles in a tank, which means you don't feel like you're filling up that often. And I've been pleasantly surprised, to be honest. And if I had the RS, that's going to be significantly worse, and the performance is pretty good. Things you can do to this car, I think you could probably chip it and get another 100 horsepower, but I'm not about that with this sort of car at the moment. It's not One, probably because most of my driving is pretty boring. It's like on a motorway or in a town, so there's actually no point in using the performance. And then if I'm going for an interesting drive, I'll take one of my sports cars, which is a different experience. But having just had a blap down a country lane, it is definitely a fun car to hustle around. It's not massive over the A6 or something that size. This is a bit more, don't feel like you're taking up quite so much road. And and you can just hustle. Yeah. Reminds me back when I had my RS3. Suspension, what is the suspension like? It's, when I first got the car, I thought it was super smooth everywhere. And then I realized that the tires were a little bit deflated. So you definitely, like all cars, if you run the tire pressures toward the lower end of where you're meant to put them, it's a bit more comfy. But if you're going to be driving fast, you probably want to increase that a little bit. Overall, the suspension's pretty chilled. I would say it's firm rather than like relaxing, but 95% of the time, I don't feel like I'm getting chucked around. I don't feel like it's bone crunching over anything. It's firm, but it's pretty good, I would say, in terms of comfort levels. I drove an RS4 that had the sort of adaptive, is it air suspension? And that was better. That was definitely better at low speeds, but I've heard that when you drive faster, that's not quite as good as the fixed rate dampers on this car. I think when you look back at this car now compared to the current car, I haven't driven the current car, but the current car is a diesel, and just having a petrol engine is nice. It feels like you're in a sportier car, makes better noises. It's not the best of sounds, but it definitely is going to sound a lot better than the diesel, and it, swings and roundabouts, I guess. I think most people who want an S probably want a bit more of that sportier sort of sound, but I think what Audi are doing is they're differentiating the RS and their S significantly more, because previously the RS used to have a big V8, which made it sound way better and whatever, different experience to the S, but now the S and the RS in 2017 had a very similar engine, pretty much the same engine, just in different states of tune, and the exhaust might be a bit louder and stuff like that. And what that then means is people may go for the S over the RS because they're so similar. And I 100%, like, I didn't feel like the engine was worth paying any more for, because it's pretty much the same. So if I was getting an RS, I would be doing it on looks alone. And looks, yes, it looks nicer. It's a cool looking car, 100%. But what value do you put on that? And then also the depreciation and all those things. I don't know. It's a tricky one. Whereas now the S is a diesel, and if you want the petrol, you have to get the RS. That's just the way it is. They've definitely done something, and I think it's pretty smart, to be honest, on the positioning of the cars and the reality of probably most people's usage. For example, for me, if I had the similar performance but from a diesel, I'm lucky enough to have other petrol cars, and this doesn't have to be the car that does everything, but it would probably do a much better daily job being a diesel, because you'd get much better fuel economy, you probably have more torque, so real world you'd cover ground quicker. Well, I don't think you massively, just brake less in a petrol car if you want to cover ground quicker rather than something with more turbo. But overall, it's been great. I'm loving it. I'm loving having an Audi again. I definitely still look at the styling I see when I see like an M3 and stuff like that, and I really like that. But the four-wheel drive doesn't really make much difference to me at the moment, but in the winter, occasionally I go to skiing or whatever and sometimes drive. It's definitely better. It's not quite as much fun, but I'll put this on and probably put this car on winters at some point, just to make it that bit better in the cold months. But overall, I'm really enjoying it. I'm really glad I've got the petrol. I was worried initially that I hadn't, sort of thought I might feel like I missed out when I didn't get the RS, but I'm enjoying saving the money. And independently of that RS existing, comparing this to the other cars, I'm very happy with it. I'm totally glad I didn't get a C63, which was one of the things I was looking at. Similar sort of price bracket, similar shaped car. I just like the look of the Audi much more, and the interior is just so much better. There's so much more space here in the Audi than in the Mercedes. So I hope you enjoyed some of my thoughts, and that came across. I feel like I covered most things. If there's anything you want to know about the car, just leave it in the comments. So I hope you're enjoying the video. Like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.